2100 hours.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Skep Live Online. Thank you for joining us. Skep Live Online is a production of the University of Hawaii, based at the University of Hawaii and Manoa Outreach College. My name is Tim Slaughter, your host for today. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Hawaii State Foundation of Culture and the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the University of Hawaii, and Kainoa Senior Services. We're excited to have you join us as always and love to stay in touch. So give us comments and questions through the chat window and let us know what you're thinking. Also, if you send your email to csinfo@hawaii.edu, you'll get notices about upcoming programs. Well, for the third day in a row, we're happy to have with us Niall de Búrca. Niall is one of Ireland's finest storytellers. He was raised in Galway and displayed a talent for a narrative from a young age. At home, he has been featured in theater, radio, and at many festivals, including the C.S. Lewis Festival and the National Children's Book Festival. He's toured here in Hawaii many years, visiting libraries, senior centers, and the like. He's a passionate advocate for arts and education, literacy, and language diversity. So let's welcome to Skep Live Online, Niall de Búrca.
Mahalo, Tim, and aloha to everybody in Hawaii or wherever you're watching. It is such a pleasure. Mila Mila Fáilte, as we say in Ireland, Mila Mila Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes. I speak to you this night from Western Ireland, 3 hours north of where I was yesterday in the southwest. I'm in my hometown. It's the city of Galway. If you've never been here, you should try and get here. It's a wonderful town, a university city, small in size, maybe 84,000 people. But as a typical small university city, the energy of the young people is incredible. It has many festivals, so in Ireland, it would be known as a cultural centre. Outside, the rain is pouring hard. It's the beginning of autumn truly this night, 30th of September, and we enter next month, October, the lead up to Ihauna, as we call Halloween here in Ireland. Ihauna. In the ancient times, it was the beginning of the new year. The 30th of October into the 1st of November marked the beginning of the dark winter months, but that was the beginning of the new year in the Celtic world and the Celtic mind. So it's a time for sciallaíocht, for storytelling. And in fact, in the storytelling calendar, this coming month is very, very busy indeed. So it's so lovely to join you. I'm going to try and fit in as many tales as I can tonight, and I'm going to kick off with an old favorite. There's many versions of this tale. I hope you like this one from Western Ireland, and it goes like this. What's in a name? You know the meaning of your own name. Tim, Margaret, Richard, Sean, Delilah. There's always a story behind a name. Now I'll tell you about a man whose name was Martin Quinlivan. He was named after a powerful saint, Saint Martin, and he bore his name well. It fitted him like a good shoe on a foot. He was a confident young man, and he made his living from the trading of horses. In the eastern part of this county is one of the most famous horse fairs in the country. It's called Ballinasloe. And he would be there every year buying and selling. Oh, he knew horse flesh. He was happy with the road before him and the wind behind him, trading in horses up and down the 4 provinces of the island of Ireland. And the only thing he thought that would make his heart full was marriage to a good woman. And that duly came about. In South Galway, in a place called Gort in Chiguira, a beautiful, handsome town, at a fair, he met a young woman called Siobhan. Her name was Siobhan Tannion, and he asked for her hand in marriage, and she agreed. And indeed, the marriage was mighty. And soon after, she announced that she was exúla páiste, expectant with child. Oh, Martin Quinlivan, the joy in his heart, a happy marriage. He had enough money to buy a little farm, a nice house, and a beautiful wife he adored. Agus bhí sé exúla páiste, and she expected a baby. And when it came time for her to give birth, she said, whether it's a boy or a girl, Martin, I want you to choose the name of our firstborn. He said, it doesn't matter to me. You choose. She said, no, Martin, I adore you. You name the first child, and I'll name the second. And hopefully we'll go at ping pong the names, and we'll have many kids in this home. The joy. The night she was given birth, he was pacing outside the room. In those days, you couldn't be inside if you were a man. The midwife was there and several of the local women, and he pacing by the fire. And then the happiest sound was heard in the world when first heard. When first heard, but not 8 months later at 3 o'clock in the morning. The midwife came out and bid him to go inside. He walked in, and there he saw his beautiful firstborn. Martin, she says, isn't this child gorgeous? And he looked down at the little boy. He took that, you know the way little newborns look, little squished up face. In fact, he looked about 700 years old. You know, they have the wisdom of the ages on their faces and in their eyes. He kissed the little baba on the cheeks, the smell of a newborn. And after a while, he gave it back to his wife, and she put the baby to her breast. She said, now go away and think of a good name. He went outside and he began to think. Then he talked to his friends. He talked to her parents. And they all suggested, call James, it was a common name in Ireland then, or Hamish, which is just another form of the name James. He thought about his own grandfather, Sean. He was a fine man, big, strong man in his time. And then he was thinking of other names. He thought, why just pick an ordinary name? Why not really pick a powerful, powerful name? And he thought, Michael, after Saint Michael, one of the most powerful of all the angels in heaven. Yeah, that would be a good one. Or Patrick, Saint Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland. Or Saint Paul. No, I'll go even higher. Why don't I name my kid after the boss? I'll call my son God. Maybe that's not such a good idea. If I call my child God, then the devil will always tempt him. I don't want the devil tempting my child as he grows up. Maybe I'll name my child after the devil. That'd be great. And then he'll have the devil's luck. And they say those with the devil's luck, oh, they live long and prosper greatly. I call him devil. Satan. No. Lucifer. No. You get short name of Lou. Never liked that name. I can't call him after the devil. He'll never get into heaven because the devil is never allowed into heaven. What am I going to do? I want him to have a long life. I can't call him Life. That's a bit of a silly name. And then Martin Quinlivan had an idea. Do you know when an idea just comes to you? Inspiration. He says, why don't I call him after the one who takes life? I'll call him after death. I bet you Death has never had the compliment of somebody being christened after him. I'll name him Death. I hope my wife reacts okay. Well, the day came for the christening. And she kept saying to him, Martin, what are you going to call the baby? And he says, I'll tell you at the baptismal font. She said, okay. And they went into the church that day. He was in his finest clothes, and she dressed in beautiful lace herself, and the little baby all swaddling clothed in her arms. He was so proud. They went up to the baptismal font, and all their friends and relations behind them. And the priest, he says, okay, what's the name of the child going to be? And Martin said, Death. The priest went, what? Death? His wife went, Martin, you gone crazy? He said, trust me, I think it's a good idea. You said I could call him anything I wanted, and I'm sticking to it. Death should be his name. And the priest said, this new generation, the names they're coming up with, I never heard the like of it. And he sprinkled on the holy water. The child's head was dipped, and he was christened Death. And just at that second, Martin Quinlivan, he felt himself being sucked out of his body He's having an outer body experience. He's floating over the people at the baptismal font in the church. He's looking down at himself. He's floating in slow motion. And he hears a voice behind him. I have to say, you've got some gall. That's a great thing. You've a great sense of irony, calling your wee one after me. He looks over his shoulder as he's floating in the air in the middle of the church. And there was the fella with the big long cloak. And the eyes are red and the scythe in his hand and the bony finger. He's going, come here, wee man. I think it's fantastic you called your wee one after me. I'm going to give you a present in return. I, the one who takes life, will give you the gift to preserve life. And he went like this with his bony fingers. And he stuck him straight through Martin Quinlivan's skin. And Martin began to shake and he began to quiver. As Death said, I now give you the gift of healing. As Martin began to float down into his body again, Death said, but there is a price. Martin Quinlivan, if ever I appear at the head of the bed of someone to whom you are healing, you must step back and let me take them away. And never defy me. Do you hear me? Never defy my wish. Martin said, okay. You will heal and become famous, but do not deny the ones I want, or I'll take you instead. Whoosh! Martin Quinlivan, he's back in his body, and his wife goes, honey, you went faint for a second. Are you okay? He said, Tommy Carcalor, I'm okay. Oh, my goodness, though, his senses. He felt so alive. Being close to death, they say, it gives a beautiful taste of life. He says, darling, he seemed to be able to look deep into her and tell the health of her. He looked around and he saw his father-in-law, and he suddenly realized his father-in-law, he had a bad kidney. He looked the other way, he could see his cousin John. His cousin John had a sore eye and he didn't even know it yet. It was about to manifest itself. He seemed to have this knowledge. Anyway, they left the church and they went back to the house, and the dancing, storytelling and singing, dancing and feeding all of the night long and into the next day. Never was there a happier man ever. The next day, his poor father-in-law, he's complaining about his kidneys. And Martin says, here, lift up your shirt. And he got his glove, his hand, and he placed his hand onto the father-in-law. And the father-in-law went, oh, Martin, that feels amazing. The pain is gone. Then he went to John. He said, John, give me a look at your eye. And he put his thumb up to it. And John went, it was beginning to feel all sore, but now it feels great. Soon, word spread of Martin Quinlivan's gift. He began to help everybody in the whole of the parish. Whether they were half dead, whenever he laid his hands upon the spot where they were dying, they'd jump up and they'd dance jigs and reels. He was soon curing half the county, but every so often, when he'd be at the bedside of somebody, and invariably it was late at night, every so often, he'd feel the dank smell of the grave come, and he'd feel the presence of death, and he'd step back and he'd take his hand away from the patient, and death would come and look at him and smile and take that person away. But death can't be denied. Time passed. His wife had another 2 children. Martin, between the horses and the healing, even though he would never take any money from it, people, they would give him presents. They would give him lovely, a saddle for a horse. They would go and give him corn and grain. He was prospering mighty. And then winter came. And when winter comes, so does too the sniffles and the coughing and the wheezing and the flu. Comes around every year. That's what it does do. And one time his wife took sick. She began sniffling, she began coughing, she began wheezing, and then the fever took her. And she was in the bed, and no matter what he did, no matter where he put his hand, he couldn't get rid of the fever, he couldn't get rid of the sniffles, and his children, they're crying in the other room, the priest is called, and Martin can't work it out. It's in the middle of the night. And the priest gave her extreme unction, he gave her the last rites. He said, there's nothing we can do. And the doctor said likewise. And it was the first time that a doctor had been around Martin since the christening of his firstborn. He'd even got in the doctor to see if he could do anything. And he's putting his hands all over her, and he's crying, and he's begging her. And he knows what's going to happen. First he smells it. Then he feels it. The cloying atmosphere. The stillness. Except in his body, his heart is pumping in terror. And he can't stand the thought of losing his wife. Just as death was appearing, Martin switched the bed around. So death, he didn't appear at the head of the bed. He appeared at the bottom of the bed, right by Martin's wife's legs. And suddenly she began to open her eyes and feel better. And death said, you have defied me. And I told you never to defy me. If ever you do, I take you instead. I'll take you now. And he went to grab a hold of him. When Martin said, excuse me, Death, I'm very, very sorry. I couldn't see my wife dead. I really, really couldn't, Death. You could take me, but please, will you just leave me alone until I can say the words of the Lord's Prayer? Let me just start it and then finish it. And promise you won't take me until I finish the Lord's Prayer, because you'll have me forever. At least spare me the time to say the prayer. All right, I promise I won't take you until you finish the Lord's Prayer. Now start and hurry up. I'm busy this night. It's the flu season. Hurry! And Martin went, okay. Our Father who art in heaven, I'm not going to finish this prayer for the next 50 years. Sucker. Tricked ya! You promised you wouldn't take me until I finished the Lord's Prayer. And I'm not finishing it until I've got great-grandchildren. No bucko. And then he pulled himself up to his full height. And he said, see you, hey? You might trick me once or twice, but I'll get you. Ken what I mean? And then he disappeared. And Martin turned around, and his wife says, who are you talking to? He said, love, you're just having hallucinations. You're coming out of the fever. I'm delighted you're okay. Let me get you some tea. I tell you what, Martin Quinlivan was smart, like I told you earlier. He didn't say no Lord's Prayer for many a year. And then one May, at the beginning of summer, the time in Ireland, while in normal times before the COVID, when many children would make their first communion, Martin was going into the city of Galway. He was going to go and see a saddler called Grealish, who lived on Eyre Square. And as Martin was riding into Galway, it was a beautiful May morning, that big blue Irish sky with those big happy clouds, big puffs of clouds above his head, this beautiful smell of the summer. As he was riding along, Honigshade, Itavan Voher, he saw by the side of the road, he saw a little boy, a ladog, Bugal Biog Buidag, a tiny little boy. Agus vi an Bugal ag Chuine, the boy was crying like this. He looked in terror. Martin looked down from the horse and he said, what ails you, wee lad? Look at you. And the boy looked up. You know when there's a little one crying so hard, there's snot coming out of their nose and their eyes are running. And his poor face was aflame with tears. I'm sorry, I can't talk. I'm too upset. I'm bleeding. And his lip is wobbling. Now, Martin Quinlivan, there was only one thing he loved more than his wife and horses, and that was children. It's an awful thing to hear a child crying uncontrollably, isn't it? Gets down off the horse. He says, laddie, come here to me. Where's your people? I'm an orphan, sir. I'm an orphan, and I'm making my communion. I live in the orphanage through the fields beyond. And I'm just no good. The bishop is coming, and we all have to know our prayers, and I don't know any. I'm no good at saying the prayers. I can't do the Hail Mary. Oh, you poor little fella, I'll help you. After me, Hail Mary, full of grace. Hail Mary, full of grace. And he helped them say the Hail Mary prayer. But the little fella, he kept crying. Oh, come on, young fella. Sure, you know the prayer now. But I can't say the Our Father. And it's the longest one, and I'm no good at it, sir. And the bishop might say that I'm no good. He would not. He's a lovely bishop. No, sir. And the other boys might make fun of me because I'm always making mistakes. I'm no good at doing anything, sir. I'm no good. I teach you the Lord's Prayer, lad. I teach you the Our Father. Say the words after me, laddie. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be the name. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be the name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And he started to say the words. And the sun's shining on his face and he's feeling so good. And the sound of the birds all around him. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. And Martin looked and saw the lad og the boy no more. For the boy was changing shape and growing tall, with a great long cape and hood and scythe in one skeletal claw, and a bony finger pointing straight towards Martin Quinlivan's eyes. The boy had become death himself. Quinlivan, I told you, you might trick me once, you might trick me twice, but you'll nae trick death thrice. Now come with me now. Ken what I mean? And he stuck that bony digit straight between the eyes of Martin Quinlivan. And then he opened the folds of his cloak. Tara Shack, come inside. The horse went up on its hind legs, and then it raced across the countryside back to Martin's farm. There was no sign of him ever seen again on the roads of Galway or anywhere else. But his people are still around there. South Galway, there's a few Quinlivans, lots of Tanyans, fine people. And if you go to Galway, you'll see some great horse flesh and people who love horses, especially in late July, when it's probably the best horse racing festival in the whole Ireland, the Galway races. And that's a tale from long ago. Hope you liked it. Many of you will know there's versions of that story all over the world. The good ones always get copied. And Tim asked me last night, he said, Neil, would you ever tell a story from another culture? Well, there's an example of a story that just spins around the world and goes into different cultures the whole time. I remember years ago actually hearing a story in Scandinavia that I'd also heard in South Asia. And there's a West Galway version as well. So good tales that get copied everywhere. And I hope you enjoyed that one. So yeah, let's crack on, shall we? I'm going to tell you another story, another fairy story now. And this tale, it's actually about a fella who came home one night and he heard his children crying. And he walked into his cottage and there was his wife. And she looked up, she said, I can't stop them. They're driving me up. I love them to bits, but husband, we've no wood, we've no turf. We've no wood in our turf to cook the potatoes, to cook the meat. The kids are starving. And he said, oh, I've been so distracted, I'm sorry. I'll go and get some now. And he went outside, but it was too dark. He went into a shed. There was no turf. He ran out of turf. There'd been bad weather for weeks and it all got used up. And then there was no wood. There was little wood thereabouts, actually. It was a part of Ireland where there was little forestry. He was frustrated and he felt guilty because that was his job, he felt. He went inside. He said, I'm so sorry. Milla prawn arm. She said, I have to feed him. You'll have to get wood somewhere. And he said, let me go and have a look, darling. I'm awful sorry. And he set off and he got a sickle, you know, a sickle? And he began to go through the countryside. And then he remembered at the top of a nearby hill, there was an old fort. And if ever you come to Ireland, you will see in the countryside, if you drive around every so often, you'll just see a circular mound. Now, they're known as very special places. A lot of people call them fairy forts. Dún, a liss. That's what they're often called, a liss, or a dún. So he goes up the hill, and he knows there's good wood all around that old fairy fort. So he thinks to himself, I'm not scared of pish rogues. I'm not scared of superstitions. I'll just cut a bit of wood, that's all. I just need it to get the kids fed. It's not a bad thing to be doing. I'm not being disrespectful to the good people. And he starts chopping with the sickle at some fine bush, and it's good and dry. But as soon as he sank the sickle in, as soon as it cracked, a voice said, what do you think you're doing? You can't be coming here destroying where we live. And he looked around, and he saw the most amazing thing. There was this old man, quite diminutive and small. And the old man said, will you stop that at once? For God's sake, the cut of you. What's your name? I said, my name is Flanagan. Flanagan, you fool, don't be chopping the wood. You can't do that around here. This is our home. Have some respect. He said, well, I have to feed my family. My children are at home and they're starving. I couldn't get any wood. This is the only place I can find it. The forests of Ireland have been half chopped down, and it's been such wet weather I haven't had time to go and get fresh turf. I'll give you something for it. What could you give me? I'll give you something that'll keep your family fed. The small man, he reached into his pockets and he took out 2 stones, querns, like you grind corn. Take these. He said, they're only 2 stones. You fool, Flanagan. They're quern stones. You can make meal from it. Meal that'll feed your family and make them healthy and good. Take it. How do I do it? I just rub them together and see what happens. I promise you. But leave this place alone. Show respect for the Dini Ma, the good people. And he said, okay. Flanagan was kind at heart. And he took the 2 stones, the quern stones. They were very light, and he thought, I'm crazy. She'll kill me when I get home. She really will. But I can't do this to this place. And he goes back down the hill. He goes into his house. Can you imagine the reaction? How would you react if your loved one came in and they put 2 stones on the table instead of wood for the light your fire? She said, what are you doing? Look at the kids. He said, I went up. I was chopping wood above at the fairy fort, above the liss at the top of the hill. She said, you went up there? And this man appeared, a small man, and he asked me not to do it. She said, you'd be a fool to chop wood there anyway. And he gave you these. He gave me those. He said, they'll always give us meal. She said, but how? He said, just rub them together. And he began to rub them together. And it began to go tinkle, tinkle. And it began to spin around. And beautiful cornmeal began to fly out. Well, I tell you what, they cooked that up that night. It cooked by itself as it came out. And the most beautiful loaves of bread. But those children, I'll tell you, after 3 or 4 weeks of eating from those quern stones, those kids, they was fat and happy and full of the joys of life. Martin, or Flanagan, he went up the hill, he went up to the liss, and he called out to the man, Sir, will you come out and speak to me? And the man appeared and he said, hi, it's a happy hour with the cornstones. I hope you're not wanting anything else. He said, I'm very happy. I've just come up here to thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry that I was going to attack your wood. It was just a situation. Don't worry. Listen, you'll always have food now and respect the good people. But you must do one thing. Whatever you do, never, ever sell the meal that comes from that magic quernstone. If you do, it'll have no power no more. And Martin says, okay, I'll see you. Now, normally people in them times be terrified of the good people, the fairy people. Martin, he was glad of his acquaintance. He went back down the hill and into the house. And time went by, and the family prospered greatly. Never a drop of hunger or belly pang in their bellies. But one time, his wife, she was in the village on market day, and she was going by a shop. And in that shop window, she saw the most beautiful dresses, and the most wonderful ribbons, and the most wonderful scarves. And she thought to herself, as we all do, God, that's beautiful. It was a lovely saffron scarf. It was her favorite color. She said to herself, we've plenty of food, but we've no money. I wonder if I just sold a bit of the meal from the cornstones. What didn't she do? But she went home and she went and she spun around. She got some of the meal. She went back to the village. She sold it and she went and she got the scarf. She brought it home. And that night when she went to make the dinner, she began to spin the stones around and not a thing happened. And not a thing, even though she made her hands raw and spin around those cornstones. And he came in, he said, what's wrong? She said, it won't give us any food. And he began to do it himself. Not a thing happened. He was so angry. He said, was there anything happened? She said, no, nothing at all. And he took the cornstones up to the fairy fort and he shouted out, he said, hey, he says, this thing won't work no more. Will you come out and talk to me? Will you stop disturbing me? The little man came out of the fairy fort. He said, what's wrong with you, Flanagan? Are you up here to see me again? Have you no friends down there at the bottom of the hill? Come on, we're about to start singing and dancing in here. We want no humans disturbing us. And he said, the cornstones won't work. Ah! Well, I told you they won't work. If ever the meal is sold for money. Well, nobody, your wife did. She went into the village today. She wanted a lovely saffron scarf. It won't work no more. And poor Flanagan. He said, what am I going to do? Times are really tough. If we go home and I tell them we can't get no more food, for goodness sake, you humans, you're a pain. I normally wouldn't do this, but I do it for you. Take this. Agus chuir sé lámh in a fóca agus tharann sé amach leabhar. He put his hand in his pocket and he took out a book. Take this book now. What is it? It's a book of medicine. Every cure of the world is in it. You keep death away from every door. But don't be coming up here annoying me again. It's the last time I'll help you. And you know what he did? He took that book and he gave thanks to the good man. And he went down the hill and he went into his wife. And from that day onwards, he took up doctoring, keeping death from the door. And I heard he was a lot more successful than Martin Quinlivan. So that's how his people became doctors. Passed the book on to the children, and away they went, curing people for a little few shillings here and there, and it's kept them in good health from that day to this day. Put on the kettle, make some tea. Good luck to them, good luck to ye. That's a story on a similar vein. We've only time for one more tonight, and I hope you enjoyed that tale. It's good to go with the flow on stories. That one's a generic folk tale that you find round about these parts. This next one is not so common, and this next one I really enjoy. I'm going to take off my jacket for this one, and I really like this story, and I hope you like it too. It's about a young. Put that over there. It's about a young fella who was in big trouble. And if anybody's got any questions at the end, if you have any questions about Ireland or Irish culture in respect to storytelling or other things perhaps, please feel free to ask. This will be the last story, and then Dr. Slaughter will come back on and we'll take a couple of questions. Just a little drink of ishka, it's the Irish for water, and we'll kick on with this one. Goes like this. There was a king in Ireland long ago, fado, long ago. The king had 12 beautiful daughters. They all became teenagers, late teenagers, until the first daughter, she was in her late 20s. And the youngest daughter, she was 18 years of age. 12 daughters, and they all slept in one room, and they were all full of fun and banter. They were also full of demands of their father. I need a new dress. I need a new crown. There's more people coming to town. We need new shoes. So we had 12 beautiful dresses made for them every year. But suddenly things began to go badly wrong. Not only did they want the dresses, but they wanted new shoes every year. And he gave them 12 dresses and 12 shoes. And then it began to get really weird. Every morning when they get up, their dresses would be all soiled, like they've been going through bushes, and the shoes would be all muddy. And he began to say to them, what's going on at night? How come your dresses, these expensive dresses, I meant to get you one every year, but now suddenly you're destroying them every night. Every night it gets worse. We need new ones. He said, why can't you keep them good? Are you sneaking out at night? And they said, none of your business. He said, don't you talk to me like that. Only the first time that was heard in the house. And look at your shoes. You're a disgrace. You're ruining me. I'll have no money. He began to be a very angry monarch, and angry kings are dangerous things. He said, I'm the king. What I say goes. No, we'll do what we want. Oh, you will you? I'll lock you in your room every night. You can stay in the one room with your 12 beds, and every morning I'll let you out. Now, you won't be going destroying any dresses or going out. I know you're sneaking out from the mud in your shoes. He locked them in the room. He locked them in the room. But before he did, he got them 12 new dresses and 12 new pairs of shoes. Next morning, he opens up the door of the room, and guess what? The new dresses, they're all dirty and they're all stained with mud and cut with bramble bushes, and the shoes are muddy again. We want more dresses. We want. He says, how are you sneaking out? I will find out how you're sneaking out. How will you find out? You haven't got a hope. He says, I'll get someone to find out. And he left the castle and he saw a young man. He said, you, yes, sir, into my castle now. He said, you're going to sleep in the same room as my 12 daughters this night. And you're going to tell me how they're getting out of the castle each night. I know they're going away causing mischief each evening. They're ruining any new dress I get them and any shoes I get them. But sir, I don't want to do it. You better do it. You don't do what a king says, you lose your head. But if you find out how they've been getting out, you can marry any one of my daughters that you want. And you get a king's ransom, a castle of your own, become a prince. The young man went in. An extra bed was put into the room of the princesses. There were now 13 beds, and he was in the 13th one. Dun, dun, dun! 13, my friends, an unlucky number. Now, says the king to his daughters, there's a young man in your room tonight, and he'll keep an eye on you, and he'll be able to tell me if you're sneaking away. Now, get them new dresses and new shoes. The king's daughters must always look well. You won't be able to get out and ruin them tonight. And he locked them inside with the young man. As soon as the young man was locked inside with the 12 princesses, the eldest wandered over to him, and she said, isn't it a fine fellow you are altogether, and you're here to join us? Why don't you have a little drink? She handed him a fine crystal glass, and in it a sweet nectar. He took a drink. 2 minutes later, he's fast asleep. Of course, they'd thrown in a potion to make him fall asleep. And then they laughed. And then the eldest daughter, she went up to the fireplace and she jumped up on the floor. She did a little dance right on a stone in front of the fireplace. And when she did, it popped open and made a tunnel. Come on, girls, she says, let's put on the new dresses and shoes. It's time to go. They're waiting for us. Next morning, before the sun came up, the princesses returned, and their dresses were as usual. They were all sweaty and bramblebush ripped and their shoes muddy. They get into the room just as the king is opening the door, and they close off the secret tunnel. And when the king comes in, he sees their new dresses and their shoes are all as usual, stained and dirty. And he turned to the young man who was still asleep and he said, off with his head! And that's what they did. They took the head off him. Don't mess with the monarch. He went out and he got a second man. Same thing happened. And in the end, every young man in that kingdom was fleeing away but one. There was a poor lad who was very, very much loyal to his mother, and she was a sickly widow woman. She depended on him greatly. He knew he couldn't escape with her. She'd moved too slow, so he had to stay there. And soon the king's men came. They said, this fellow'll do, and they dragged him before the king. The king said, you will sleep in the room of my daughters this night. And if you don't find out for me how they're escaping and ruining their dresses and their shoes every evening, you will lose your head like the others. Look up on the castle battlements. And there he saw 2 heads of young men his own age on spear tips. He said, but I'm a widow's son. My mother depends upon me. I don't care. But if you manage to succeed, you will get a castle, and any of my daughters who wants to marry you, you will get her hand in marriage and a king's ransom. Can I just say goodbye to my mother first? You've got a half an hour and be back here, for it's a half an hour to darkness. Can you imagine how you feel? This is some ultimatum. He goes home to his mother and he told her, and she said, before you go, come with me. There's an old friend of mine in the woods. She took him quickly down the path of the woods where there was an old hut where an old Quinlivan, who was even older than his mother, a really old woman, lived. She was a wise old woman. And she said to the lad, she said, take this coat. This is a coat of concealment. And when it's on you, nobody will tell you. No one will tell that you're there. And take this, she said. And she gave him 2 little berries. She said, put those in your ears, she said. And no matter what you hear, you'll never be scared. And also, when you're in that room with those women tonight, whatever you do, don't drink what you're offered. He said, why? Just don't. Pour it down the back, whatever way you can, and then get under the cloak of concealment. Well, my friends, he took the cloak, he took the berries, and he took an old woman's advice, which is a good thing for a young fella to do. And he went up to the castle after hugging his mother. He said, don't worry, ma'am, by my cark galore, I'll be fine. When he walked through the gates, the portcullis gates of the big castle of the King of Ireland, and the king said, into the showbra, into the room of the women. You'll sleep in the 13th bed, he said. And into the room he was brought, and there's the 12 princesses looking at him. Hello, another Ramadan. The door was locked. Before it was locked, they were given 12 new beautiful dresses and 12 new pairs of shoes, each by their bed. As soon as the door was locked, the eldest came over and she said, will you have a drink? It's delicious, like nectar of the gods. He says, I will indeed, Guramila Mahagath. And he went like this, and he poured it over his shoulder down the side of the bed. And then he pretended he was falling asleep. He shut his eyes and he lay back. And the 12 women went, ha! That's him asleep. Another fella to lose the head. Come on, girls. On with the new dresses, on with the new shoes. Over to the fireplace. And the eldest begins to dance. She begins to dance on the flagstone by the fireplace. And the young fella's got one eye open and he's looking at her. And then the flagstone drew back, and there was the secret tunnel exposed. Come on, girls, they cried. Down they went. What didn't he do? You know what he did. He threw on the cloak of concealment, and he followed. Halfway down the stairs, he stepped on the youngest daughter's dress. She tripped over. Somebody stood on my dress. Harry, you're always complaining, said the eldest. Hurry up, we'll be late. Come on, they're waiting for us. At the end of the passage, there was a gate. A beautiful gate of gold that led to a bridge of silver, and across the other side there was a path. As they walked down the path, he could see all these beautiful branches on the trees made of gold and silver, and he snapped 3 off as evidence. He put them under his cloak, and the youngest said, I can hear the sound of someone snapping trees. And the eldest said, oh, stop talking like that. It's only our boyfriends blowing bugles, excited that we're going to be there. They're announcing the parties to begin. And then they get to an edge of a lake, and there's 12 handsome men on 12 big boats. And they say, hurry up, come on. The women jump in, and he jumps in concealment under the cloak, in behind the youngest. She said, the boat is heavier than usual. The rower has to row harder. Oh, shut up, you're always complaining, said her sister. On they went into a castle where they danced all night with 12 handsome men. Just before the dawn, where the women kissed their lovers, when they said, we must go back to our father. They began to go out the door, but before them, there is the young widow's son, and he's racing ahead, and he gets to the eldest sister's boat, and he jumps in. All the sisters jump into the boats. They're rowed across the lake. They go along the path. They go across the bridge. They go through the gate, up through the tunnel, and he's before them, and he jumps into his bed, the 13th bed, and he's got hidden the branches beneath them. And he takes off the cloak of concealment, puts it under the blanket, and he's snoring away all peaceful. They come in and laugh and say, he's doomed. And then the doors open and in comes the father. No, your dresses are muddy, your shoes are muddy, and ripped with brambles, your dresses too. Young fella, you failed. Off with his head. And the widow's son jumped up and he said, will you stop? I didn't fail. Your daughters, they dance a dance of enchantment that opens a tunnel that leads to their secret fairy lovers. And I've got evidence. And he threw open the cloak, and he pulled out the branches from the trees of silver and gold. This is the evidence, and it is the truth. And the king turned to his daughters. He said, you scamps. He said, well, you found out why they do it. Now, young man, is there a daughter of mine you'd like to marry? And he said, actually, Your eldest daughter, if she'll have me, I'll marry her. And I'd like the king's ransom, and I'd like my own castle. But I won't just live there with your eldest daughter if she has me. I want my mother there as well. And the eldest daughter said, You're a handsome lad, and you're smart too. I'll marry you. But there's no way I'm living with your mother. Have another castle built for her, Daddy. You can't have me in the house with his mother. I want my own way of doing things. And so it was announced it would happen. The wedding lasted 7 days and 7 nights. The seventh night was 70 times better than the first night. And you know how I know? There's a guy there telling stories. And he passed on the news of how that young widow's son got the king's daughter as a wife. Put on the kettle, make some tea. Good luck to that young fella, his wife, and good luck to you. Dr. Tim, I think I've just about wrapped it up.
I think you did. What a wonderful story. It's been fabulous having you here, Neil. You talk a lot about the Irish language, and I mean, you use the Irish language, and I know you're a big proponent of the Irish language. Can you tell us more about that? Where the situation is in Ireland? Do a lot of people? I mean, I think you've told me before that they actually have immersion schools similar to what we have here in Hawaii.
Indeed. And the situation is as it is in Hawaii and with languages all over the world. It is an endangered language now. Irish language, in the census, last census said 1.8 million can use Irish, they have it. But actually, in reality, fewer than 30,000 people now are using it as their everyday language. Although
Right.
I talk every day in Irish because I make a point of seeking out others to do, or I use what we call the cúpla focal, the few words whenever I can. So it is beyond a no doubt, it is an endangered language, just like many others. So the good news is there's a lot of young people learning it. And the great news is there's a lot of people around the world learning it, especially in the United States as well. But let the clarion call go out. Language diversity is wealth. Monolingualism, you enrich your life the more languages you know. And Hawaiian and Irish and Maori and all these beautiful languages out there, just speak them. A lot of Irish people they would love to, but they feel that they would lack a bit of self-confidence in it. So what
Mhm.
I always say is give it a go. The more mistakes you make, the merrier. My grammar in Irish would be dreadful, but I don't care. Chonabio, you have to you keep going and keep it, as we say in Ireland, keep it lit.
Very good. No, that's so true. Language diversity is so important in the world. Um, a, a lot of the names have a story behind them as well. Is there a story behind the Burka?
Indeed. In Ireland, in many instances, you can tell where someone's ancestry is from by their name. If someone has a DE in front of their name, it indicates Norman ancestry. The Normans invaded here in the late 12th century and then became more Irish than the Irish themselves after a few generations. Other big Norman names are Fitzgerald, Jennings. Do you remember there was a newsreader in American TV called Jennings?
Peter Jennings.
Peter Jennings, that would be part of my, a lot of them, when the Normans became Irish, like Jennings is a sub name of our own name. Dylan, you might have heard the name Dylan. Also Staunton and Roach and Prendergast and Power. Do you remember the actor Tyrone Power?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if somebody's got an O or a Mac, that's real old Gaelic, like McCarthy, O'Donoghue, O'Leary, O'Shea, McGuigan. And then if somebody's got a name like, Keneally or Connolly or Nee, I was brought up to believe that Nee, N-E-E, is the oldest Irish surname in folklore.
Oh,
And then you'd have names like Hamilton and Jardine, which would have come over from Scotland in the 17th century. So it's all a layer and it's fascinating. And that's how you
yeah,
can, yeah.
it sounds absolutely wonderful.
And now we've new
What,
names, I mean, from other
I'm
countries too,
sorry?
like Lithuania and Brazil. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
We have now, it's really exciting now, we have new names coming to the pot, like
Oh,
from Lithuania. And a lot of those names end with an A-U-N-A-S. Or like I met a young Irish person yesterday who smiled and actually was born in Poland. So people from Brazil are making, people from the States are coming here. And so that's all these new names are coming, which is very interesting.
no, that certainly adds to the diversity. That's wonderful.
Adds to the
Um,
pot.
adds to the pot. Oh, what kind of projects are you have up your sleeve for the near future?
Well, earlier, last week, I was actually doing some work in where refugees come first when they come to Ireland, and I was working in early childhood and grown-ups there, and I really loved it. I thought that was a really good way to, as a part of bringing folks in their new journey in Ireland. Tomorrow, I have to perform in the Town Hall Theatre here as part of a wonderful festival called the Barbaro Festival, and that they're going to film that because still with the COVID, audiences are very limited, so they'll put that out to young people in the region here. And also coming up, I've been doing a lot of work with literacy. I think I might have talked about that. Last week I did a one book, one community. Of course, that's a great initiative that comes from the United States of America, where one community reads one book. I was doing some of that last week in Cork. So with the hopefully the going of the COVID, the easing of the COVID, like many other cultural workers and arts workers, suddenly we're out on the field again. We're on the go, and we're just hoping that that good energy will continue. And like I said at the beginning tonight, this is now, tomorrow is the 1st of October, and this is really the, for Scalia, for storytelling, it's a really important time. So I will be doing a lot of book festival work. It's the National Children's Book Festival, and I'll be doing, I'm also doing a gig for an Irish embassy overseas later in the month, which I'm really looking forward to. So it's like anybody else in the arts. It can be very diverse where you end up telling stories. I never, ever ceases to amaze me where you can end up. So yeah, it's so great to talk to you, folks, and I really hope you've enjoyed the stories. Has anybody any more questions?
Well, I don't see any more, and I know it's getting late for you. We must, what does this one say? Thank you, Neil, and everyone. We must be old Gaelic. Somebody, Ed and Kathy O'Malley. So.
Oh my goodness, we've got O'Malley's out there. I salute you, noble O'Malley's. You could be my cousins. O'Malley is such an ancient name. It's from the county just north of here called Mayo. And it's a fine, ancient Irish name. And if you go to Mayo, to the beautiful town of Westport, through the Castle Bar, there's many O'Malley's. In fact, if you go to a place called Lewisburg, there's a police officer there called O'Malley. Fine, fine town, full of fine people. So it's lovely that some O'Malley's are.
We won't ask why you know a policeman there, Neil. So,
should I travel the roads? I've got ear for everything.
You do. Thank you very much for being part of Skep Live Online. It's been a wonderful week with you. We will make a point to get you here someday soon in person.
I can't wait.
Get ourselves together.
I can't wait. And listen, mahalo to everyone. And can I just very quickly say, because I've been on the road, and Mr. Richard and Margaret and everybody's been so patient getting me to be here tonight. And I want to say how much I really appreciate that. And thank you so much. It's been a privilege to be part of Skep. Mahalo and aloha.
Thank you very much. And one last big shout out to our sponsors, the National Endowment for the Arts, the University of Hawaii, the State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, Kanoa Senior Services, and Euro Audiences. So thank you for tuning in. Please send us your email address so we can alert you to future programs. Mahalo and stay safe, everyone.